Nurse was still asking me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10 when my phone buzzed on the hospital tray. I reached for it with my good arm. It was my sister. I let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, my mother called. I answered that one. "Hey," I said. My voice came out strange, thin, like it belonged to someone else. "Abby." Not a question, not "are you okay" or "we're on our way." Just my name, flat, the way she says it when she's about to tell me something I'm not going to want to hear. "Your father and I are dealing with something right now." I was lying in a hospital bed in Raleigh, North Carolina, with a fractured wrist, a bruised sternum, and a CT scan pending because the ER doctor said the words, "we want to rule out," in a tone that made me stop listening after that. A pickup truck had run a red light on Glenwood Avenue and hit the driver's side of my car while I was on my way to work. It was 8:14 in the morning. I had been at this hospital for 47 minutes. "What's going on?" I asked. "Your brothers," she said. And then she sighed, this long, practiced exhale that I have heard my entire life. The one that means you need to understand how hard this is for us. "He got fired this morning. They let him go without any notice, and he's really struggling, Abby. He drove over here, and he's been crying for 2 hours. Your father and I are trying to help him figure out what to do." My brother is 31 years old. He lives 20 minutes from my parents. He has been fired from, by my last count, 4 jobs in the past 3 years, and each time my parents drop everything. Each time the world reorganizes itself around his crisis. "Mom," I said, "I'm in the hospital." "I know," you said. "Are you? They're taking care of you there, right? Like you're in good hands?" I looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain in the shape of something I couldn't name. "They want to do a CT scan," I said. "They're worried about my head." "Oh, I'm sure it's just precautionary. You know how hospitals are, they do everything just to cover themselves." A pause. "Is there someone there with you? A friend from work, maybe?" "It's 8:30 in the morning, Mom." "What about your neighbor? The one you said was nice?" I had mentioned my neighbor once, in passing 6 months ago. I don't actually know her last name. "I'll be fine," I said. Not because I believed it, because I knew what the alternative was. Continuing this conversation, asking her to come, hearing the pause that would follow, the calculation happening behind that pause, the eventual soft voice explanation of why they couldn't. I wasn't ready for that. My sternum hurt when I breathed too deep and I wasn't ready. "Okay," she said, and she sounded genuinely relieved. "Keep us posted, okay? And Abby, try not to stress. Stress makes everything worse." She hung up. I put the phone face down on the tray and stared at the ceiling and thought about the water stain and did not cry. There is a version of me that would have cried. I've spent a lot of years becoming a different version. The nurse came back in to check my IV, and I asked her if there was a phone charger I could borrow. She found one in the nurse's station. Small kindness. I have learned to collect those. I should tell you about my brother, because otherwise none of this makes sense. His name is Drew. He is 3 years older than me and has been, for as long as I can remember, the axis around which my family orbits. Not because he's cruel. He's not, actually, not on purpose, but because he is loud and dramatic and perpetually in some form of crisis, and my parents have never once, in 31 years, let a crisis of Drew's go unattended. When we were kids, it was his grades, his fights at school, his inability to hold a job through college. When we got older, it was the DUI at 24 that my parents paid to have expunged. The business he started at 26 that my father quietly put $40,000 into, and that closed 8 months later. The apartment he needed help with the security deposit on, twice. The car loan my mother co-signed, and then ended up making 6 months of payments on herself. I am not saying this to be unkind. I am saying this because it is the context without which the rest of this story is just a sad thing that happened to a woman in a hospital bed. With the context, it's something else. I have never asked my parents for money. Not once. I put myself through the last 2 years of college on loans and a part-time job at a coffee shop. I moved to Raleigh at 24 for a position at a logistics company, found my own apartment, built my own life. I send my parents a card on their anniversary, and I call on Sundays, and I show up for holidays, and I do not keep score. I want to be clear about that. I do not keep score. Keeping score is exhausting, and it poisons everything, and I made a decision a long time ago that I was not going to live that way. But sometimes things happen that make the score impossible to ignore. The CT scan was at 11:15. They wheeled me down a long hallway with fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency I could feel in my back teeth. The technician's name was Rosario, and she had a small gold cross around her neck, and she told me to hold very still and that it would take about 8 minutes. 8 minutes is a long time to hold still. I thought about my car, which was probably totaled. I thought about the insurance claim I was going to have to file. I thought about the police report and the ER bill and the fact that I had a meeting at 10 that someone was going to have to cover and I hadn't been able to reach my manager yet because my phone had died twice. I thought about all the logistics of a crisis, the paperwork, the calls, the forms, and I thought about how I was going to have to handle all of it alone because I was 30 years old and I had built a life where I was capable of handling things alone, and that was supposed to be a good thing. A strong thing, but in that tube with the buzzing lights, I could not locate the part of me that felt good or strong about any of it. My phone had 2% battery when I got back to my room. I used it to call my husband. He picked up on the second ring. He always picks up on the second ring. He works in IT for a university in Charlotte, which is 2.5 hours from Raleigh, and he was in the middle of a server migration that had already been rescheduled twice. And I knew all of that, and I called them anyway because he is the person I call. "Hey," he said, "I was just thinking about you. How'd the Hartley meeting go?" "I didn't make it to the meeting," I said. "I'm at WakeMed." "There was an accident." Silence. 1 beat. 2. "Are you okay?" "I think so. They did a CT scan. We're waiting on results." "I'm leaving now," he said. "Tanner." That's his name, Tanner. "You don't have to do that. It's 2.5 hours and you're in the middle of." "Abby." His voice was even. "Calling the way it gets when he's already decided something and is just waiting for me to catch up. I'm leaving now. I'll be there by 2. Don't argue with me." I didn't argue with him. He arrived at 1:52. I know because I was watching the door. The CT results came back at around 1 in the afternoon. No bleed, no fracture, no areas of concern. Just a mild concussion they wanted to monitor for a few hours before they discharged me. The wrist fracture was a clean break, non-displaced, which the orthopedic resident told me was actually kind of lucky, in a tone that suggested she found this more interesting than I did. I texted my mother the update. CT is clear, just a concussion. Wrist is fractured. Monitoring for a few hours, then probably discharge. She replied, "Oh, thank goodness. Drew was doing a little better. He has a lead on something already. You know how he bounces back." Crit. I put my phone face down again. Tanner got there, and he sat in the chair next to the bed, and he didn't say much, which is one of the things I love about him. He just put his hand on my good wrist and stayed there. He had brought a bottle of water and a bag of pretzels from the vending machine in the lobby, because he knows I don't eat when I'm stressed, and then spiral later. And he knows this because he has been paying attention for 6 years. My sister called again around 2:30. I answered it this time. "Oh my God, Abby," she said, and she sounded genuinely shaken, which surprised me a little. "We are not close, not in the way some sisters are. She's 3 years older. She lives in Charlotte too. She has 2 kids and a life that doesn't leave a lot of room for other people's problems." But she sounded scared. "I just saw Mom's text. Are you okay? Why didn't you call me?" "I was managing things," I said. "You should have called me." A pause. "Where are you? I can come." "You don't have to. Tanner's here." Another pause. "Oh, good," and then, quieter, "I'm glad he's there." There was something in her voice I couldn't quite read. I didn't ask. "My parents arrived at 4:17. I want you to understand the timeline because the timeline matters. The accident was at 8:14 in the morning. Tanner left Charlotte 2.5 hours away the moment I called him and walked through my hospital room door at 1:52. My parents live 22 minutes from WakeMed. I know this because I have driven it. On a bad traffic day, maybe 30. They arrived at 4:17. My father walked in first. He had that look he gets. Not quite guilty, not quite defensive, somewhere in between. The look that means he knows he is in the wrong, but has already decided not to acknowledge it directly. My mother was behind him, carrying a tote bag that she held in front of her like a shield. She had brought food, a container of soup from the place I grew up eating, which under different circumstances would have been a gesture I appreciated. My father's eyes went to Tanner first. Tanner was sitting in the chair next to my bed, where he had been sitting for the past 2 hours and 25 minutes. He had his jacket draped over the armrest and his phone in his hand, and he looked, honestly, exactly like a man who had driven 2.5 hours to sit with his wife in a hospital room, which is what he was. My father's face did something complicated. Tanner, he said. Not hello, just the name. Mr. Holloway. Tanner stood up, which he didn't have to do, but did anyway, because that is the kind of person he is. She's doing better. CT came back clear. My father looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at me, then back at Tanner. You drove from Charlotte, he said. Yes, sir. My father set his jaw in that way he does, and looked out the window. I could see the muscles in his face working. I've spent 30 years learning to read that face, and I knew what was happening in it. He was calculating, recalibrating, doing the thing he always does when reality presents him with information he doesn't want to incorporate. We would have come sooner, he said, to the window, but Drew needed. Dad, I said it quietly, not angry, not sharp, just enough. It's fine. It wasn't fine. But I was tired, and my wrist was in a temporary splint, and I had a mild concussion, and I didn't have the energy to make it not fine out loud. My mother put the soup on the tray table and hugged me carefully, the kind of hug that avoids the injured parts, and she smelled like her house, like the specific combination of laundry detergent and the candles she always has burning, and for a moment, something in my chest cracked open a little. Not in a good way, in the way that things crack open when you've been holding them closed for a very long time. We're here now, she said. Like that was the thing that needed to be said. Yeah, I said, you are. They stayed for about an hour. My father and Tanner made small talk about the drive, about the Wolfpack game last weekend, about nothing. My mother told me about Drew, the job lead, the plan, the way he was already thinking positively, the resilience he showed. She said the word resilience twice. I did not say anything about the 8 hours I had spent in this hospital. I did not say anything about Tanner's server migration, or the 2.5 hours, or the pretzels from the vending machine. The discharge paperwork came through at 5:45. A nurse went over my concussion instructions. No screens for 48 hours. Rest, follow up with my primary care physician in a week. And then Tanner went to get the car and my parents walked with me to the elevator. In the elevator, my father cleared his throat. Drew feels terrible, by the way, he said, about the timing. I looked at the elevator doors. Does he know I was here? I asked. A pause. We told him, my mother said carefully. He wanted to come, but he was having a really hard day. The doors opened. I stepped out. Tanner was pulling up to the curb. I could see the car through the glass. The silver sedan I had helped him pick out 2 years ago. The one with the sunroof he still hasn't figured out how to work. I'm glad you're okay, my father said. He sounded like he meant it. I believe he did mean it, in the way he means most things. Genuinely, but at a certain distance, filtered through a long habit of putting certain things first. Thanks for coming, I said. I walked through the sliding glass doors and got in the car, and Tanner pulled away from the curb without asking me anything, which is the right thing when you have been at someone's side all day and you know they need to be done talking. We got on the highway. The sun was doing that thing it does in October in North Carolina, going orange and low, stretching the shadows out long across the road. I watched it through the window. My wrist ached. You okay? Tanner asked after a while. Yeah, I said. He glanced over at me. He can tell when I mean it and when I don't. Do you want to talk about it? Not yet. He nodded. He turned on the radio, low, not a station, just something ambient, something that filled the silence without demanding anything from me. We drove. I thought about it for a long time before I said anything. Weeks. Months, maybe. That's how I am. I sit with things until they stop burning and I can pick them up without getting hurt. What I kept coming back to wasn't the 417. It wasn't even the phone call in the ambulance bay. The way my mother's voice had been careful and distant. The way she'd said, "I'm sure it's just precautionary." It was the soup. She had brought soup. She had stopped somewhere. The deli 15 minutes from their house, probably, the one she's been going to for 20 years. And she had bought soup and put it in the tote bag and carried it to my hospital room. She had thought to do that. And I kept turning that over, trying to understand it. Because it meant the care was there. The instinct was there. She knew I would want soup from that place. She knew I would appreciate it. Some part of her was oriented toward me, was thinking about what I needed, was performing the gestures of mothering. But it arrived at 417. I think that's the thing I've spent most of my adult life trying to reconcile. That my parents love me, I believe they do, but their love has always operated on a hierarchy I didn't know existed until I was old enough to see it from the outside. Drew's need, loud and immediate and combustible, has always risen to the top. My need, quieter, more self-contained, has always waited, and because I was capable of waiting, because I was good at it, because I had learned to be, they let me. That's not a blame statement. I'm past blame. I'm really not. But I'm also done pretending the hierarchy doesn't exist. I talked to my sister about it eventually. We had lunch at a place halfway between our two cities, a diner off I-85, the kind of place with laminated menus and good pie, and I told her the whole thing, and she listened in a way she hadn't since we were kids. "I know," she said when I finished. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I've always known." "Do you think they know?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think they think they're treating you equally because you never needed as much, and I think they never asked themselves why you never needed as much." I thought about that for a long time after. I'm still thinking about it. The answer, if I'm being honest, if I'm being the most honest I know how to be, is that I stopped needing as much because needing was expensive. Not financially. Emotionally. It cost something every time I reached toward them and found them turn the other direction. And eventually I did what people do when something costs too much. I stopped buying it. I built a different economy. I built Tanner and a small circle of friends who show up, and a life that doesn't require me to wait for anyone to arrive at 417. I called my mother on a Sunday in January, 3 months after the accident. The wrist had healed. The concussion stuff had faded. I had gone back to work and filed the insurance claim and replaced the car and dealt with all of it the way I deal with all of it, which is one thing at a time without making a lot of noise about it. I called her on a Sunday the way I always do. We talked about her garden, about the weather, about a show she was watching on Netflix. She asked about Tanner. I asked about Drew, out of habit, mostly, because his name fills a certain amount of space in every conversation, and it's easier to give it that space than to leave a gap she'll fill with something worse. He had the new job. It was going well. He seemed happy. "Good," I said, and I meant it. I am not interested in Drew's suffering. I never have been. There was a pause then, longer than usual, and I knew she was deciding whether to say something. My mother is many things, but she is not unaware. She knows, I think, more than she lets on. "Abby," she said, "I know we should have come sooner. In September." I didn't say anything. It was a hard morning, but that's not an excuse. I let the silence sit for a moment. I didn't rush to fill it. "I know," I said finally. "Thank you for saying that. Are you angry with us?" Honest answer, a little. Not the sharp kind of angry. Not anymore. The low, tired kind. The kind that doesn't want anything from you, just wants to be acknowledged. I said. "I'm less angry than I am. I don't know. Clearer, maybe. About some things." "What things?" I thought about how to say it. I thought about the ambulance and the ceiling and the water stain. I thought about Tanner saying "I'm leaving now" and meaning it. I thought about the diner off I-85 and my sister's hands wrapped around the coffee mug. I thought about soup at 417. About who I can count on, I said, and what I need that to look like going forward. She was quiet. "I love you, Mom. That's not the part that's in question." "I love you too, baby." And she does. I know she does. That has never been the question. The question has always been about what love looks like when it's 8,014 in the morning and someone on the other end of the phone needs you to show up. Not eventually, not when it's convenient, not after the other crisis has been managed and the soup has been bought and the tote bag has been packed. Now. Right now. Some people know how to do that. Some people have to learn. And some people, the ones who spent their whole lives waiting for 417, eventually stop waiting and start building something that doesn't make them wait anymore. That part, at least, I think I figured out. I keep thinking about the soup. Not the accident, not the 417, not even my father's face when he walked in and saw Tanner sitting there. I keep thinking about the soup. She stopped somewhere on the way. She thought to do that. Some part of her knew what I would want, and she went and got it and carried it across a parking lot and brought it to me. It just took her 8 hours to do it. There's a version of me, the younger version, the one who used to rehearse what she would say before Sunday phone calls. Who would have thrown that in her face? Who would have let the soup become a symbol of everything wrong every time I came in second, every crisis of Drew's that swallowed the room whole? That version of me was not wrong to be angry. She just would have gotten stuck there. What I understand now, at 30, is that cause and consequence don't always look the way we expect them to. My parents' pattern, always toward Drew, always toward the loudest need in the room, didn't produce a villain. It produced a family that never had to ask itself hard questions because I was too quiet to force them. I made it easy. I handled things. I stopped calling when I was scared, because calling had taught me not to expect much. And because I stopped calling, they stopped practicing. And because they stopped practicing, they arrived at 417 carrying soup, genuinely believing they'd shown up. That's not wickedness. It's a long accumulation of small choices that nobody examined closely enough, including me. What I've had to sit with, and this is the part that took the most out of me, is that I made choices too. I built a life of radical self-sufficiency that was, underneath all its genuine strength, also a wall. I told myself I didn't need them. I told myself I was fine. I got good at being fine, until being fine became the only thing anyone expected from me. Tanner is the one person I let through that wall, and the reason I know he's real is because he showed up before I even finished the sentence. He didn't need to be convinced. He didn't need the situation explained. He just moved. That's what I was looking for from my parents. Not the soup, the movement. And here's what I believe about that now. The people who move without being asked have usually been practicing. They built a habit of paying attention, of letting someone else's urgency land in their body the way it should. My husband has that. My parents, somewhere along the way, lost it. Or maybe never built it for me the way they built it for my brother. The capacity for that kind of showing up is something you develop through countless small moments of choosing to pay attention when it's inconvenient. It's a form of moral muscle. You use it or you lose it. I don't want to lose it. I think about the kind of person I want to be when someone I love is in a hospital bed, and I know the answer clearly. I want to be the person who is already in the car. I want to have practiced paying attention so many times, in so many small situations, that it becomes the only thing I know how to do when it counts. That's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a discipline. It's a decision you make over and over in the moments where it would be easier to wait and see. I'm also learning slower, harder, that being strong doesn't mean being unneedy. It means knowing what you need and being honest about it. I confused those two things for a long time. I thought self-sufficiency was a virtue. It can be. It can also be a way of making yourself very easy to overlook. My mother said she was sorry. I believe her. My father hasn't said it yet. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'm not waiting anymore.